So let's talk about multi-channel networks. So multi-channel networks are these companies that started to serve some of the unique needs that creators have, right? You gotta make content, you gotta build an audience, you gotta monetize the audience. If those three needs are a tricycle, creators usually think of the content part as like the big wheel, pulling the whole thing forward. If they can let someone else take care of the second parts, they'd like for someone to do that, because those things are hard. MCNs existed to serve those needs, right? So a company like Maker Studios, for instance, right? Forms in 2009. It evolved out of this project called The Station, where a whole bunch of big-time YouTubers got together, folks with really, really big channels. They all got together in like the Venice Beach, Playa Vista, Marina del Rey area, and they started hanging out and making lots of content together. And this project was called The Station. A bunch of those folks later went on to found Maker Studios based on the idea that like, wow, if you got, 10 people with 1 million subscribers, I mean, the numbers weren't that big back then because it was 2009, but if you've all got big numbers, then you could sort of all converge them in one place, and that's what the network part was. It's like, we're gonna work together for mutual benefit. These were like the cool kids clubs of YouTube. When you put a whole bunch of really popular people together in a group, people want to be part of that group. MCNs realized like, wow, we could make a buck off that. So they started producing these contracts and having anyone and everyone sign them. At one point, like Maker Studios was like, yeah, we've got 50,000 creators in network. And I'm like, wow, your offices have no more than a few dozen reps to serve all those people. Ostensibly, you're supposed to get a certain number of benefits, right? They knew that they couldn't handle that. The point was so that they could go to venture capitalists and say on their slide deck, we've got 1 billion views. Can you believe that? 1 billion views. Look at the big B on our board. That means 1 billion. Something that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the big multi-channel networks that came after Maker, so like Big Frame, Full Screen, Style Hall, Collective Digital, all these companies were founded in 2011. Why that year? Well, because there was a company called Next New Networks that YouTube bought for $50 million in 2011. That sale inspires a whole bunch of people to start their own companies. Because YouTube is like a big, they're a trendsetter. If you're a venture capitalist, you're going to take that as a cue to say, that's what I'm gonna invest in. So, within 5 years, all those companies got sold. All of them. Anyway, back to MCNs. Did you know that sometimes they would ask you for 30% of all of your advertising revenue in your contract, and then sometimes they wouldn't specify whether they were asking for gross or net CPM? What that means is like, okay, so say you've got a $1 CPM. As part of the whole YouTube deal, you take 55% of that $1, so 55 cents. If the MCN claims that it's gross, then they're taking 30% of $1. If they're saying net, then they're saying 30% of your 55%, which is like 16%, I think. The funny thing is that like in Hollywood, that shit does not happen. I mean, like, okay, bad contracts happen in Hollywood. But if you've got an agent, right, in Hollywood, if you've got someone with like UTA or CAA, or really any agency operating in Hollywood because it's a regulated profession, like you have to be licensed by the state, you have to be franchised by the union, there's a lot of rules you have to follow if you're an agent in Hollywood. And one of them is that you can take no more than 10% of the gross revenue from the employment that you procure for your client. That to me is a really good rule, right? There's another rule. Oh, agents can't own a stake in the company that they're trying to get you hired to. If I own the studio, my incentive is to negotiate the lowest rate possible for the talent. But as an agent, like if your client is paying you, shouldn't you be asking for the highest rate possible? That's a conflict of interest that is limited by regulation at the state level and the union level. MCNs don't follow any of those rules. Can you believe that? They don't follow, and the thing is, what they'll say is, well, we're not an agency because the Talent Agencies Act in California defines an agent as someone who procures employment. Then it becomes a question of like, okay, so if I sign with an MCN and they negotiate a brand deal for me, are they negotiating employment? Is a brand deal employment? What's employment for a creator? They are their own independent businesses. That's something that we tell ourselves. It's like, we are independent businesses. But what that means is that we don't get the same protections that actors do in Hollywood. But what I will say is that agencies were not specifically built to serve the needs of creators. They are regulated. They are set up in a way that reduces the number of conflicts of interest, but they're not there to help you make web content. They're not there to help you build an audience, and they're not there to help you monetize that audience. That's simply not in their DNA. Specifically, they're built to serve these folks who are outlined in the Talent Agencies Act. And this is like actors, singers, types of like traditional Hollywood talent. And what binds those folks together is like a unique need that they have, which is to get gigs. Like, that's kind of the whole game. But for creators, it's a lot more complicated, right? You're doing all kinds of creative work from pre to post production. There's the audience building and monetization stuff that are their own jobs, right? Like that require unique competencies. Agencies simply don't know how to do those things. They're getting better, but generally speaking, they're not. They weren't structurally built with those things in mind. So this is the dilemma that creators are in right now. On the one hand, MCNs, which are built to serve their needs, are not regulated, and so have this sort of problem where oftentimes you can't trust them not to take advantage of you. On the other hand, agencies who do benefit from regulation are not built to serve your unique needs. So there's this gap in the market. Where do you go? Where do you go if you need support? This is not all to say that like no one has benefited from membership in an MCN or from a really nice agent, right? Plenty of people have, but I think that there's a very real gap that exists right now, and so that brings me to my final sort of series of comments about a new company that's popping up, which is called 368. I think of it as Casey Neistat's response to this major gap in the market for creators. He's been pitching it as this company where creators will be given assistance developing their careers, developing their content. Casey Neistat can do this because he's Casey Neistat, and if he promotes new talent, people will watch the new talent. The question is whether like internally the company will look more like an agency or an MCN. I think it's probably going to look like a little bit of both. I wouldn't be surprised if 368 sort of took structural aspects from the MCN model, having like a dedicated sales department for advertising sales and for hooking up brand deals, a dedicated like events and tours department or a dedicated a merch department, right? Like I think that those make sense as like roles within the company. Or it could be that he's going to hire a bunch of agents who just know how to develop digital talent to directly interact with creators on a one-on-one basis to develop their career, to develop their brand deals, get them to the place where they want to be. Basically an incubator for influencers. The fact that it's in New York is particularly interesting because that's where the advertising money is, as opposed to Los Angeles where like the media investment money was. That's kind of why the MCNs all popped up there. I think the fact that Jack Conte is interested and involved, and the fact that Casey Neistat's been making videos with like the founder of Reddit, I think that indicates that there's probably going to be a platform element to this. Traditionally, there's been this sort of like conventional wisdom that it's not really cool to take a bunch of viewers and fragment their experience and take them to other websites to get them to watch content. But Jack Conte has clearly proven with his experience on Patreon that you can do that. The question remains, like, will a company like 368 be able to outmaneuver the major Hollywood talent agencies that are slowly moving into the space? That's a battle that's going to play out over the next 5-10 years, and I think I think creators would benefit from paying attention to it closely and with an eye for the greater context of like the kinds of challenges our industry is dealing with right now. We should take some agency in forming the new structures that will emerge from this developing space. Do I sound like an executive director now? I'm doing my best. Peace out, guys. See ya.